On a freezing December night in 1983, the air over League City, Texas, didn't just chill, it suffocated. A thick, unnatural fog, born of the Gulf's damp breath and the refinery plumes staining the horizon like industrial bruises, rolled silently over the abandoned Calder field. It wasn't the kind of fog that whispered through pine trees or softened moonlight. This was a living shroud, heavy with the metallic tang of oil and the cloying sweetness of decaying vegetation, swallowing the skeletal outlines of rusted oil derricks and the gnarled, leafless limbs of live oaks. The only sound was the distant, rhythmic thump-thump-thump of distant pumps, the heartbeat of industry, and the occasional hollow plink of condensation falling from a corroded pipe onto the brittle, salt-crusted earth. Moonlight, when it dared pierce the murk, glinted off puddles of stagnant water that had pooled in the ruts of an old, forgotten dirt road, now barely more than a scar across the land. The field itself was a graveyard of neglect. Waist-high, matted grasses choked with prickly pear cactus and thorny vines stretched toward the distant, flickering orange glow of I-45, a ribbon of indifferent light carrying thousands of anonymous souls home each night. It was a place designed to be unseen, unheard. A perfect place, as one investigator would later say, for killing somebody and getting away with it. Heidi Marie Villarreal Fay knew none of this when she left the dim, sticky warmth of the Texas Moon Club. At 10:47 p.m., her heels clicked a frantic rhythm on the cracked asphalt parking lot, a counterpoint to the bass thump still vibrating through her bones. She'd been working double shifts again, the fluorescent lights of the bar bleaching the color from her skin, the smell of cheap whiskey and sweat clinging to her clothes like a second skin. She was 25, with eyes the color of storm clouds, and a laugh that used to fill rooms before life ground it down to a whisper. Tonight she'd worn her favorite black dress, the one with the lace trim she'd bought on sale, and a single strand of pearls her grandmother had given her before she died. She needed to feel beautiful, even if only for 5 minutes, walking home. She lived just 2 miles away, in a small, weather-beaten house on the edge of town, where the streetlights gave way to the oppressive dark of the Calder field. The direct route was a shortcut, familiar, safe, or so she thought. A white van, its windows tinted black as obsidian, idled silently near the entrance to the field, half hidden behind a cluster of dead mesquite trees. Its engine was cold, but the driver's side window was down a fraction, revealing nothing but deeper shadow within. Heidi didn't see it. She was focused on the path ahead, the crunch of gravel under her boots, the ache in her feet. She pulled her coat tighter, the fabric thin against the sudden biting wind that sliced through the fog. As she passed the van, a low, guttural hum began. Not from the engine, but from somewhere inside the cab. A vibration, a sound felt in the teeth as much as heard. Heidi paused, instinctively a prickle crawling up her neck. She glanced sideways. Nothing moved. Just the fog, swirling lazily around the van's bumper. She took another step. The passenger door swung open, silently, without a creak. A hand emerged. Not large, not rough, but unnervingly precise. Gloved in thin, dark leather. It held no weapon she could see, only a small rectangular object, a compact flashlight, a phone that emitted a soft, blue-white glow. "Miss," a voice called out, muffled, distorted by the fog and the van's interior. It sounded young, almost hesitant. "You all right? You look lost." Heidi froze. Every fiber screamed run. But the voice, it wasn't threatening. It was concerned. Too concerned. Like a neighbor checking on a late-night walker. "I'm fine," she managed, forcing a smile she didn't feel. "Just heading home." She kept walking, faster now, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. The hand retreated. The door closed. The van remained silent. Heidi didn't look back. She broke into a jog, the crunch of her steps suddenly deafening in the suffocating quiet. The fog seemed to thicken around her, pulling tendrils of cold moisture into her lungs. She reached the first row of tall, dry grasses bordering the field, the last patch of relative cover before the open, exposed stretch leading to her house. Then, the world ended. Not with a scream, not with a crash, but with the soft, wet thud of something heavy landing on the ground behind her. And then, a silence so absolute it roared in her ears. She turned. The van was gone, vanished into the mist as if it had never been. But lying in the long grass, illuminated by the weak, dying moonlight filtering through the haze, was a single pearl, her grandmother's pearl. It had snapped from its thread, and beside it, pressed deep into the mud, was the distinct three-pronged imprint of a boot heel, a work boot, heavy, industrial, and it pointed directly towards the center of the Calder field. Heidi didn't move. She didn't breathe. She stared at the pearl, then at the boot print, her mind refusing to connect the dots. It must have fallen, her rational self whispered. I dropped it when I stopped. That's all. But the timing, the impossible silence after the van vanished. A low, guttural moan echoed from the darkness beyond the field, a sound that didn't belong to any animal she knew. It was too human, too full of despair. Then, nothing. Trembling violently, Heidi bent down, her fingers numb, and picked up the pearl. It was cold, colder than the night air. She slipped it into her pocket, a talisman against the dread coiling in her stomach. She forced herself to keep walking, her legs leaden, every shadow in the grass a lurking predator. She made it to the edge of her property, fumbled with her keys, slammed the door shut, and leaned against it, gasping, listening to the silence of her own house. Nothing stirred inside, no creak of floorboards, no rustle of curtain. She didn't turn on the light. 3 days later, the dog found her skull. It was a scruffy, mangy mutt named Buster, belonging to the elderly Mrs. Eleanor Griggs, who lived in a bungalow on the far side of Calder Road. Buster was a scavenger, drawn to the scent of decay that clung to the marshland like a curse. He'd been digging at the base of a dead cottonwood tree for hours, his claws scraping against the hard-packed earth, when he unearthed something white and smooth. He brought it to the porch, dropped it at Mrs. Griggs' slippered feet, with a hopeful wag of his tail. Mrs. Griggs, 82 and nearly blind, peered down. "Oh, my stars," she murmured, squinting. "That's a pretty little bowl. Looks like one of those fancy ones they sell at the hardware store." She picked it up, brushing off the dirt. It was cool, too cool, and it had a ridge along the top, a ridge that curved. Her wrinkled fingers traced it. "Oh, Lord Jesus," she whispered, the blood draining from her face. "No." She dropped it. The skull rolled once, coming to rest against the wooden step, its empty eye sockets staring blankly at the gray Texas sky. Buster whimpered, sensing the shift in the air, the sudden, icy terror that had replaced the warm scent of coffee and baking bread. Mrs. Griggs didn't call the police. She couldn't. Her hands shook too violently. Instead, she stumbled back into her house, locked the door, and wept until dawn. By noon, the League City Police Department arrived. They found the skull, the rest of the body buried beneath 4 inches of damp soil and tangled roots, partially consumed by insects and the relentless humidity. The body was nude, save for a single, tattered piece of black lace lingerie. The arms were folded neatly across the chest, as if arranged. The face was bloated, unrecognizable, but the hair, long, dark, and streaked with a distinctive faded red highlight near the temples, matched the description of Heidi Villarreal Fay, reported missing since Monday night. The coroner's report was chillingly clinical. Strangulation, manual, fingers perhaps gloved, no signs of sexual assault, no defensive wounds. She hadn't fought, she hadn't run. She'd been taken, silenced, and laid down with a terrible, ritualistic calm. The media dubbed it the Calder Road body. The public, already jaded by rumors of runaways and petty crimes, barely blinked. Another girl lost to the city's dark underbelly. The police filed it under probable homicide. No leads. The case number 80. In the quiet of their living room, Heidi's mother, Lillian, watched the grainy news footage on their small black and white TV. She saw the blurry image of the field, the flashing lights, the somber faces of detectives. She saw the photo of her daughter, smiling in a bright yellow sundress at the beach last summer. Lillian didn't cry. Not then. She sat very still, her knuckles white where she gripped the armrest. The fog outside her window seemed thicker tonight. She reached into her purse, her fingers closing around a small, smooth stone she'd picked up on a trip to Galveston years ago. She'd carried it ever since. Now she placed it gently on the coffee table next to Heidi's photograph. "Heidi," she whispered, the word tasting like ash. "I know you're out there." 2 weeks after Heidi's body was found, Detective Sergeant Frank Vargas stood alone in the Calder field at midnight. He'd come because the official investigation had stalled, choked on bureaucracy and apathy. He needed to feel it, to breathe the same air that had killed her. His flashlight beam cut a frail cone through the fog, illuminating dust motes dancing like disturbed spirits. He walked the perimeter, past the cottonwood tree, past the spot where the body lay, marked now by a simple crooked cross fashioned from 2 sticks and tied with twine. He noticed things the initial sweep missed. Near the base of the tree, half buried in mud, was a single torn fragment of dark green canvas, not from Heidi's clothing. Too coarse, too thick, workwear. He carefully bagged it. Further out, near the old, collapsed fence line, he found a discarded cigarette butt, filtered, cheap brand, but the filter was crushed, not chewed, crushed deliberately, as if someone had held it tightly while thinking or waiting. And then he saw it, on the trunk of a nearby ancient live oak, barely visible unless you were looking for it, scratched into the bark with something sharp. A knife, a fingernail, was a symbol, a crude, spiraling spiral. 3 concentric rings, incomplete, ending abruptly. Vargas froze. He'd seen it before, in a file from 1971, the Johnson Shore case. A similar mark scratched onto a rock near the reservoir where their bodies were found. A mark dismissed as graffiti by the original investigators. A mark he'd never forgotten. He shone his light closer. The scratch was fresh. Fresh enough that the sap beneath the bark was still glistening faintly in the beam. Someone had been here. Recently. Watch. He backed away slowly, the beam trembling slightly in his hand. The fog seemed to press in. Colder now. The distant thump, thump, thump of the pumps sounded less like machinery and more like a slow, deliberate heartbeat. He turned to leave. Something moved in the shadows between 2 oil derricks. A shape, tall, thin, standing perfectly still, facing him. Vargas raised the flashlight. The beam swept across the space. Nothing, just darkness, and the wind sighing through the dead grass. He ran. The investigation became a ghost hunt. The FBI, initially dismissive, sent Agent Richard Renison, a young man with eyes too old for his face, fresh out of Quantico. He arrived in the spring of '84, just as the search for Laura Miller, a 16-year-old girl who'd vanished after using a payphone near the same convenience store Heidi had visited. Renison saw the pattern instantly. The location, the method, the eerie stillness of the victims. Heidi Villarreal, 25, cocktail waitress. Laura Miller, 16, high school sophomore. Both found in the Calder field, arms folded, posed like sleeping dolls. He reviewed the files on the 70s disappearances. Colette Wilson, Rhonda Johnson, Sharon Shaw, Gloria Gonzalez. 11 girls, all vanished near I-45. All bodies found in isolated, swampy areas. All cases closed as runaways or accidents. They weren't runaways, Renison told his superior, his voice low, urgent. They were chosen, and they were placed. He created a profile, male, late 30s to early 50s, likely local. Deep knowledge of the area's geography, knows the Calder field is a dumping ground because it's remote, damp, and the water destroys evidence. Methodical, patient, obsessed with control, the folding of the arms, ritual, a statement, a signature. He interviewed the families. Lillian Villarreal, hollow-eyed, spoke only of the pearl. She wore it every day, she'd say, clutching a locket containing a tiny picture of Heidi as a child. It was her good luck charm. If it fell, someone took her, someone who knew what it meant. He met Tim Miller, Laura's father, a quiet man whose grief had hardened into granite. He showed Renison hours of audio tapes he'd recorded of conversations with neighbors, local mechanics, anyone who might have seen Laura that day. One name came up repeatedly, Clyde Hedrick. Hedrick lived on Calder Road, owned a small construction business, had a record, trespassing, DWI, sexual assault charges, dismissed. He'd been seen arguing with Heidi the night she disappeared at the Texas Moon Club. Witnesses said he'd followed her out. He'd been spotted near the payphone, where Laura vanished. He drove a white pickup truck. Renison dug deeper. Hedrick had been arrested in '78 for assaulting a teenager near the beach in Galveston. The victim survived. She described a man with cold eyes and a habit of humming a tuneless, discordant melody while he touched her. Renison played the tape of the victim's testimony. The melody, it was the same low, guttural hum Heidi's friend had described hearing from the van that night. Renison requested a warrant for Hedrick's truck. Forensics found traces of a unique, rare type of clay, identical to the soil composition of the Calder field, embedded in the tread of the tires. Also, a single strand of dark hair, dyed a faded red, caught in the seatbelt mechanism. It was circumstantial, weak, but it was something. They brought Hedrick in. He was calm, too calm. He denied everything. Said he'd been home watching TV the night Heidi vanished. His alibi was his ex-wife, who claimed she'd been asleep. She wouldn't corroborate. She hated him. When shown the clay, he shrugged. Lots of people go out there. I fix roads. I've got dirt on my boots. When shown the hair, he smirked. My ex-girlfriend used to dye her hair that color, used to live down the block. Probably got it on my truck when she came by. Renison pressed him on the spiral symbol. You know what this means? Hedrick's smirk vanished. For a split second, his eyes darted to the corner of the interrogation room, where a dusty, framed photograph hung on the wall. A picture of the Calder field, taken decades ago, showing the derricks in full operation. His gaze lingered on the central derrick, the tallest one, its skeleton stark against the sky. Never seen it, he muttered. Some kids play stupid games. They had no murder weapon, no DNA, no witnesses to the actual crime. The evidence was too old, too contaminated. The case went cold. Hedrick walked. Laura Miller's body was found on February 2nd, 1986, exactly 17 months after she vanished, 60 feet from where Heidi's body lay, beneath the same type of live oak, same pose, same eerie tranquility. The Calder field was officially labeled a killing ground. The press coined the term, the Texas killing fields. Renison felt the weight of it crushing him. He was assigned to other cases. He tried to sleep. He dreamed of fog, of folded arms, of a spiral etched in blood on bark. He quit the Houston PD in 1988, moved to Oklahoma, became a private investigator, but he never forgot. He kept the file, the fragment of canvas, the cigarette butt, the photograph of the spiral, and every year, on the anniversary of Heidi's death, he returned to League City. He walked the Calder field at midnight. He stood by the crosses marking the graves of the women. He listened to the wind. He always felt watched. 10 years passed. The field grew quieter. New houses sprouted on the periphery. The dirt road was paved. A church bought the land. A small memorial of 4 crosses was erected. one for Heidi, one for Laura, and two for Jane Doe and Janet Doe, the two unidentified women found in. Renison retired. He lived in a small cabin in the woods, surrounded by silence. He drank too much bourbon. He collected newspaper clippings about unsolved murders. He kept a single framed photo on his desk. A young woman with storm cloud eyes and a single pearl necklace. Heidi Villarreal Fay. One rainy Tuesday in January 2019, his old FBI contact agent Maria Lopez called. "Frank," she said, her voice crackling over the line. "We've got something. Genetic genealogy. We pulled mitochondrial DNA from the remains of Jane Doe and Janet Doe, cross-referenced with public databases. We have names." Renison's hand trembled as he set down his glass. "Jane Doe," he whispered. "Audrey Lee Cook, mechanic. Last seen December 1985, near Channelview. And Janet Doe, Donna Gonsul, in Prudhomme. Mother of two. Last seen July 1991. Nassau Bay." Silence stretched, thick and heavy as the fog over League City. "Do you know what this means, Frank?" Lopez asked, her voice tight with emotion. "We've identified them. We have their families. We have their lives. And we know they were murdered in the same place, by the same hand." Renison looked out his window. Rain lashed the pines. He thought of the spiral, the hum, the white van, the glove. "Maria," he said, his voice hoarse, aged by decades of silence and guilt. "Get me the file on Clyde Hedrick." There was a pause. "Why?" "He's been out for 7 years, paroled after serving time for Ellen Beeson's corpse abuse. He's a nobody." "Get me the file," Renison repeated, the words feeling like stones in his throat. "And get me the results of the new forensic analysis on the clay sample from the truck tire. And the hair, the red hair." He hung up. He walked to his bookshelf. He pulled out the old, battered folder. He opened it. Inside, tucked beneath the faded photographs and brittle paper, was a small plastic evidence bag. Inside the bag, a single dried fragment of dark green canvas. He stared at it. Then, slowly, deliberately, he picked up his phone and dialed the League City Police Department. "Hello," came the sleepy voice of a duty officer. "This is Frank Vargas," Renison said, his voice clear, strong, cutting through the rain. "I need you to send a unit to the Calder Field Memorial, right now." "What for?" "Because," Renison whispered, his eyes fixed on the rain-streaked window, reflecting the pale, ghostly outline of the crosses. "I think I finally know why the spiral ends abruptly." He paused. The silence on the line was absolute, because it doesn't end. He disconnected. Outside, the rain ceased. The clouds parted, just for a moment, revealing a sliver of cold, silver moonlight. It fell directly onto the cross marking Audrey Cook's grave. And for a single terrifying instant, the carved wood of the cross seemed to ripple, as if the shadow beneath it had moved. Not a shadow, a hand, pale, gloved, slipping back into the darkness. The rain had stopped, but the air in League City still hung thick and wet, like a damp shroud pressed against the skin. It was 3:17 a.m., and Detective Sergeant Frank Vargas stood alone on the newly paved Calder Road, his flashlight beam cutting a trembling path through the lingering mist. The church's memorial crosses, 4 stark white silhouettes against the gloom, were just visible ahead, their wooden arms reaching skyward like silent prayers. He hadn't come to pay respects. He'd come because the silence here wasn't empty. It was listening. He'd been back every night since the call from Agent Lopez. Every night he walked this stretch, from the overgrown ditch where Heidi Villarreal Fay's body was found, past the spot where Laura Miller lay, to the edge of the field where Audrey Cook and Donna Prudhomme were discovered. He'd seen the new fence, the small plaque, the flowers left by grieving families. He'd seen the way the locals now hurried past, eyes downcast, as if the ground itself might reach up and grab them. But tonight something was different. It wasn't a sound. Not exactly. It was the absence of sound. The distant hum of I-45, the constant drone of civilization that even this desolate patch couldn't fully drown out, had vanished. The crickets had fallen silent. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. The only thing moving was the fog, swirling lazily around the base of the nearest cross, coiling like smoke around the name Audrey Lee Cook. Vargas raised his flashlight. The beam caught the glint of something wet on the grass near the foot of Cook's marker. He knelt, ignoring the cold seeping through his trousers. It wasn't dew, it was oil. Dark, viscous, smelling faintly of diesel and something older, metallic, like rusted iron left in salt water. He touched it with a gloved finger. It was warm, fresh. His breath hitched. He scanned the area. Nothing. Just the crosses, the dark trees, the endless, suffocating blackness beyond the road. Then, his light caught it again. Not on the ground, on the cross itself. Scratched into the smooth, painted wood of Audrey Cook's marker, barely visible beneath the grime and moss, was a symbol. A spiral. 3 concentric rings. Incomplete, ending abruptly. Just like the one he'd found on the live oak tree 36 years ago. Vargas's heart hammered against his ribs. He pulled his phone from his pocket, fingers numb, and snapped a photo. He didn't dare touch it. He didn't dare breathe. He backed away slowly, his gaze fixed on the cross. The fog seemed to thicken, pressing closer. The oil stain on the grass glistened under his light, impossibly bright. And then, from deep within the field, beyond the line of dead oaks and crumbling derricks, came a single soft click, like a camera shutter, or a safety being released. Vargas froze. He swung the flashlight beam into the darkness. Nothing moved, just the whispering of the mist. He turned and ran. The file on Clyde Hedrick sat open on Frank Vargas's kitchen table, illuminated by the harsh glow of a single lamp. Outside, the Texas dawn was breaking, a pale, sickly yellow bleeding into the sky. Vargas hadn't slept. He'd poured 3 fingers of bourbon, then 2 more, and stared at the evidence photos until his vision blurred. Clyde Edwin Hedrick, age 67. Paroled October 2021 after serving 8 years for the abuse of Ellen Beeson's corpse. Convicted felon, trespassing, DWI, sexual assault, dismissed. Attempted arson, possession of marijuana. Known associate of victims' families. Former neighbor of Tim Miller, a man who lived on the very edge of the killing fields, whose truck had been found near multiple crime scenes, whose ex-wife's daughter had testified to his predatory behavior, whose jailhouse confession to murdering Heidi and Laura had been dismissed as the ramblings of a desperate man. And yet, the spiral. Vargas picked up the photograph he'd taken. He held it next to the original faded Polaroid he'd kept hidden in his wallet for decades. The same mark, same crude, frantic scratch, same unfinished spiral. He opened the digital file on his laptop, the FBI's forensic analysis of the oil sample from the cross. Results: trace elements of industrial lubricant, consistent with heavy machinery used in oil field construction. Also present, microscopic fragments of human keratin, hair, and DNA. He clicked process. The results loaded slowly, agonizingly. Sample match. Clyde Edwin Hedrick. Probability. Vargas leaned back, the chair groaning under his weight. His hand trembled as he reached for the bourbon bottle. He didn't drink. He just stared at the screen. Hedrick had been in prison for most of the time between 1983 and 1991. He'd been incarcerated for the Beeson case from late 1984 until his parole in 2021. How could he have placed the bodies of Audrey Cook and Donna Prudhomme? How could he have scratched that symbol onto their memorial cross? Unless Vargas's blood ran cold. He pulled up the timeline of Hedrick's incarcerations. He scrolled back, past the Beeson conviction. He found the early arrest, 1978, for public indecency, for harassing girls near the beach. He'd served 6 months, released early. He looked at the dates of the first wave of murders. Colette Wilson, Rhonda Johnson, Sharon Shaw, Gloria Gonzalez. All. Hedrick was 23 in 1971. Living in Galveston. Working odd jobs. No record. No suspicion. But what if he wasn't the killer then? What if he was something else? Vargas dug deeper into the old case files, the ones buried in microfiche at the Harris County Archives. He found it buried in a deposition from the lead detective on the Johnson Shaw case, retired and dying of cancer in 1999, recorded by an overzealous intern. The kid, Hedrick. He came to us after self-confessed, said he knew things, said he'd seen Bell, saw him dragging something heavy in the dark near the reservoir, said Bell had a van, white, had a dent on the driver's side, said Bell would go out there to that old oil field off Calder Road, sometimes at night, humming some damn tune. We thought he was trying to get attention, maybe hoping for immunity. He was weird, kept talking about the spiral. Said Bell carved it on trees. We wrote him off. He was just another creepy kid. Then self-retracted his confession, and everything got messy. We dropped Hedrick. Edward Harold Bell, the exhibitionist, the flasher, the man who fled Texas in 1978 after killing Larry Dickens, the man who later claimed responsibility for 11 murders, the man who died in prison, the man who had been known to frequent the Calder field. Vargas stared at the screen. Bell, not Hedrick. Bell was the killer of the 70s, the man who taught someone else how to do it, who showed them the place, who showed them the symbol, who showed them the ritual. He picked up the phone. He dialed the number for the Texas Department of Criminal Justice. He asked for the prison records of Edward Harold Bell, specifically any inmate correspondence, any journals, anything written during his incarceration after. He waited, the seconds stretching into minutes, each one heavier than the last. The line clicked. A bored-sounding clerk answered. Bell's cell was searched after his death. The clerk said, all personal effects were destroyed per protocol, except for one item, a small notebook, bound in leather, found taped inside the false bottom of his toilet tank. It was sent to the state archives as a potential artifact. It's labeled EHB Personal Notes. You want me to pull the request? Vargas closed his eyes. Yes, please. Urgently. He hung up. He went to the window. The sun was fully up now, casting long, sharp shadows across his backyard. The world outside was normal. Cars drove by. A dog barked. A child laughed. But inside his house, in the quiet room filled with the ghosts of dead girls, the world had cracked open. He thought of the oil on the cross, the fresh warmth, the hair. Hedrick hadn't done it. Not the killings, not the placements, but he'd been there, watching, learning, and now, 36 years later, he was back. The archive was a cavernous, dust-choked warehouse on the outskirts of Austin, a relic of bureaucratic indifference. Vargas, clad in a borrowed pair of latex gloves, stood before a steel cabinet marked EHB Personal Notes. The folder inside was thin, bound in cracked brown leather. The pages were brittle. The ink faded to sepia. The handwriting was tight, precise, almost elegant. Not the scrawl of a madman, but the careful script of someone who took meticulous notes. He opened it. Page 1. They think I'm a fool, a leper, a dirty old man who shows his dick to children. They don't understand. This isn't about sex. It's about control, about making them see, making them know they are nothing, less than dirt, less than the mud that swallows them. Page 5. The field is perfect. Isolation, water, silence. The refineries hide the smell. The highway hides the screams. You bury them deep enough, the earth forgets. But not me. I remember every face, every tear, every scream choked off by my hand. Page 12. Found the boy today. Young, too young. 17, 18. He came to the beach, watched me, didn't run, Didn't scream, just watched, eyes wide, like he saw God or the devil. I offered him a ride. He got in, took him to the field, showed him the derrick, showed him the spot, told him about the spiral, told him why it ends. Because the end is the beginning. He understood. He nodded. He said he'd be back. He knows now. He knows the way. Vargas's breath caught. He flipped faster. Page 23. Saw the girl today. Pretty, dark hair, red highlight. She was crying, sitting on the curb, phone in her hand, waiting. For who? A boyfriend? A friend? Doesn't matter. She'll be gone soon. Like the others, I've decided I won't take her. Not yet. But I'll show him. I'll show the boy. I'll show him how to make her disappear. How to make her beautiful. Folded arms. Silent. Peaceful. Like sleep. He'll understand. He'll learn. He'll carry it forward. He'll become the new one. Page 34. The boy came back. He brought me a gift. A pearl. Said it belonged to his mother. Said she wore it every day. Said it was her good luck charm. Said she'd lost it. He wanted to know if I'd seen it. I told him yes. I told him I'd found it. In the mud. Near the tree. He cried. He kissed my hand. Said thank you. Said he'd never forget. Said he'd make them all like her. Quiet, still, beautiful. I told him he was ready. I told him to go, to wait, to watch, to learn. He left. He didn't look back. I know he'll be back. He always comes back. Page 42. I am tired. My body is failing. The doctors say I have months, maybe less, but I am satisfied. The work is done. The seed is planted. The boy will carry it. He understands the field. He understands the spiral. He will make them remember. He will make them fear. He will make them pray. I am leaving. I am going to Panama. I will die there. But the work continues. Tell them it was me. Tell them it was Belle. Tell them the names. Colette, Rhonda, Sharon, Gloria, Allison, Debbie, Maria, Kimberly, Suzanne, Brooks, Georgia, Susie, Tina, Michelle, Susan, Heidi, Laura, Audrey, Donna. Tell them I did this. Tell them I made the first spiral. Tell them the boy will make the rest. The final page was blank except for a single smudged fingerprint and a tiny dried smear of red pigment. Vargas closed the book. His hands shook violently. He felt sick. Edward Harold Bell hadn't just been a killer. He had been a teacher. And the boy he'd shown the field. The boy who'd received the pearl. That boy was Clyde Hedrick. Hedrick hadn't murdered Heidi Villarreal Fye or Laura Miller. He'd been there. He'd witnessed. He'd learned. And when Bell was arrested, when he was imprisoned, when he was finally silenced, Hedrick had waited. He'd waited for the right moment, for the right people, for the field to be forgotten. And now, 36 years later, he was returning. Not to kill, to finish, to complete the ritual Bell had begun, to carve his own spiral. The call came at 11:40. Frank Vargas was sitting in his car, parked on the shoulder of Calder Road, half a mile from the memorial. He'd driven out again, drawn like a moth to the flame. He'd been watching the crosses, waiting, hoping for something. The phone buzzed, an unknown number. He answered. Detective Vargas. A voice. Male. Calm. Smooth. Familiar though he couldn't place it. Lowered, as if speaking through a filter. You found the notebook. Vargas's blood turned to ice. He gripped the steering wheel. Who is this? I'm glad you're still working the case. The voice continued, ignoring the question. Most of them gave up. Too many years. Too many lies. But you didn't stop looking. That's admirable. You're the one who put the oil on the cross, Vargas said, his voice low, steady despite the terror clawing at his throat. You're the one who scratched the spiral. A soft chuckle, devoid of humor. Not me. Never me. I was just a student, a faithful pupil. I learned well. Who are you? Vargas demanded. Where are you? I'm everywhere. The voice whispered, the words seeming to slide out of the fog itself. I'm in the wind that blows through those dead trees. I'm in the oil that stains the earth, where they lie. I'm in the silence after the last scream. There was a pause, filled only by the static crackle of the line. You know who I am, detective. You've known since you found the pearl. Vargas's mind raced. The pearl, Heidi's pearl, found beside her body, found by the dog, found by Mrs. Griggs. He remembered the coroner's report, the initial description. The pearl was described as a single, cultured pearl, approximately 8 millimeters in diameter, strung on a silk thread. Thread severed cleanly, suggesting force. And then, the interview with Lillian Villarreal Fay, Heidi's mother. Her statement. She wore it every day. It was her good luck charm. If it fell, someone took her. Someone who knew what it meant. Someone who knew what it meant. Someone who knew Heidi. Someone who had seen her wear it. Someone who had taken it. Someone who had given it to Belle. Someone who had watched Belle give it to the boy. Someone who had carried it for 36 years. Vargas's breath stopped. The voice spoke again, softer now, almost tender. Do you remember the day your wife died? Detective, January 12th, 1998. Cancer. Slow. Painful. You held her hand. You promised her you'd keep going, that you'd find meaning in the chaos. Vargas's entire body went rigid. He hadn't spoken of his wife's death to anyone. Not in connection with this case. Not publicly. Not even to his partner. How? He breathed. The field remembers everything. Detective, the voice murmured. It remembers the tears, the prayers, the promises. It remembers the man who wept in the rain for his little girl, the man who searched for decades, the man who still walks the field at night, holding on to hope like a rosary. Vargas's vision blurred. He thought of Lillian Villarreal Fay, clutching the locket, of Tim Miller, founding Equisearch, of Diane Gonsalon Hastings, waiting 30 years for her sister's name. The voice continued, a chilling lullaby. You think you're hunting a monster, but monsters aren't born. Detective, they're made, by silence, by indifference, by the slow rot of a system that lets girls vanish because they're just girls, just runaways, just noise in the background. He paused. Vargas could hear the faintest echo of a low, guttural hum on the line. The same hum Heidi's friend had heard from the van. Belle made me. But you made me stronger. You kept the story alive. You kept searching. You kept the names alive. You didn't let them fade. So now, I need to finish what he started. I need to make them see. Vargas's hand tightened on the phone. What are you going to do? The voice became a whisper, so close Vargas could feel it against his ear, though he was alone in the car. I'm going to make you the last witness. The line went dead. Vargas slammed the phone down. He fumbled for his flashlight, his hands slick with sweat. He swept the beam across the field. The crosses were still there, but the mist was thicker than ever, and moving, not drifting, flowing, toward the center of the field, toward the oldest, tallest derrick, its skeletal frame looming against the moonless sky like the spine of a buried leviathan. And then, in the center of that flow, something shifted. A shape, tall, thin, standing perfectly still, facing him, wearing a long dark coat, and in its hand, a single glowing object, a pearl, white, cold, perfect. Vargas didn't move, he didn't breathe, he just stared, and the figure raised the pearl slowly, deliberately, toward the sky, as if offering it to the dark. Then it lowered its hand, and vanished, into the mist, leaving behind only the faint, fading scent of oil and the unmistakable, echoing click of a camera shutter. The Texas Equus headquarters in Houston was a converted warehouse, filled with the quiet hum of computers, the scent of coffee, and the overwhelming weight of missing persons reports. Tim Miller sat at a desk piled high with folders, his face etched with exhaustion. He'd been awake for 36 hours straight. He'd flown to Dallas to meet with a private investigator who claimed to have a tip about a white van spotted near the killing fields on the night of the oil stain incident. He didn't believe it. Not really. But he believed in doing. He'd been doing this for 38 years. He picked up a photograph from the stack. Heidi Villarreal Fay, smiling, bright-eyed, wearing her pearls. He traced her face with a calloused thumb. "Why you, Heidi?" he whispered. "Why did you walk into that field?" His phone buzzed. Another unknown number. He sighed, expecting another crank call, another false lead. He answered. "Tim Miller?" The voice was different this time. Older, weaker, trembling, female. "Yes," Tim said, instantly alert. "My name is Eleanor Griggs," the voice said, each word a struggle. I live on Calder Road. The dog, Buster. He found the skull." Tim's heart lurched. "Mrs. Griggs, what is it? Are you all right?" I can't sleep anymore," she whispered. "Every night I hear it. The hum, low, like a radio playing underwater. And I see the pearl on the ground, next to the cross. And then I see him, standing there, in the fog, just watching." Tim leaned forward. "Who, Mrs. Griggs? Who are you seeing?" There was a long pause, a ragged, wet inhale. "He's wearing a blue shirt," she croaked, with a logo, a bird, a falcon. "I saw it once, long ago, at the club, when she came in. Heidi," she pointed it out, said it was funny, said it looked like a chicken with wings. Tim's blood froze. He knew that logo. He'd seen it on 100 shirts, on 100 employees, at the Texas Moon Club, on the uniform of the bouncer, on the shirt worn by the man who'd argued with Heidi the night she vanished. The man who'd been seen following her out. The man who'd been identified as Clyde Hedrick. But Hedrick didn't wear a blue shirt. He wore coveralls. He wore jeans. He wore a cowboy hat. Tim's mind raced. He'd interviewed dozens of staff from the Texas Moon Club over the years. He'd reviewed security footage. He'd combed through employee rosters. He'd never found a match for the man in the blue shirt, because no such man existed. Or so he thought. "Mrs. Griggs," Tim said, his voice suddenly calm, cold, the voice of a man who'd spent decades staring into the abyss. "Can you describe the man? The one you saw in the fog?" Another pause, longer this time, filled with the sound of labored breathing. He had short hair, gray, and his eyes, oh Lord, his eyes, they weren't human, they were hollow, like two holes in the dark. Tim closed his eyes. He saw the face in the grainy surveillance photo from the convenience store. The man who'd bought cigarettes while Heidi used the payphone. The man who'd been seen near the field the night Laura Miller vanished. The man who'd never been identified. The man who'd been called the Shadow in internal police memos. The man who'd been the ghost in the machine. And then Mrs. Griggs added, her voice barely audible, a whisper that carried the weight of a lifetime of terror. And he was holding a camera. The federal courthouse in Houston was a monument to stone and steel, its marble halls echoing with the solemnity of justice. Inside courtroom 3B, the air was thick with tension. Reporters huddled near the back, cameras poised. Families sat in the front rows, faces etched with grief and dread. Tim Miller sat alone, his hands clasped tightly together, his gaze fixed on the defendant's table. Clyde Hedrick sat there, looking smaller than he had in court. His once broad shoulders were slumped. His gray hair was neatly combed. He wore a clean, dark suit. He looked like a retired accountant, not a monster. The judge read the charges: civil liability, wrongful death, damages sought, 20. The defense attorney, a slick-haired woman with a practiced smile, argued that Hedrick had served his time, that he'd been convicted of abusing a corpse, not murder, that the civil suit was an attempt to punish him for crimes he'd never been proven to commit, that the evidence presented by Tim Miller, a collection of circumstantial hearsay, old rumors and emotional testimony, was insufficient. Then Tim Miller rose. He didn't speak into the microphone. He walked slowly to the center of the courtroom. He faced the jury. He looked directly at Hedrick. "I don't care about the money," Tim said, his voice clear, strong, carrying effortlessly through the hushed room. "I don't care if you're punished. I care about the truth." He pulled a small, sealed plastic bag from his jacket. Inside was a single faded photograph. He held it up. It was a black and white image, taken in the late 1970s. It showed a group of men standing outside the Texas Moon Club. One man was laughing, arms slung around a younger colleague. The other was tall, thin, wearing a dark turtleneck, his face partially obscured by shadow. But the man on the right, the one with the dark turtleneck, he was wearing a blue shirt, and on the breast pocket, clearly visible, was the emblem, a falcon. Tim's voice cracked, not with emotion, but with the sheer, unbearable weight of revelation. "That's not Clyde Hedrick," he said, his eyes locked on Hedrick's face. "That's the man who killed my daughter. That's the man who killed Heidi Villarreal-Fay. That's the man who watched Edward Bell teach the ritual. That's the man who took Heidi's pearl. That's the man who has been walking among us for 40 years. He lowered the photo. Clyde Hedrick was a pawn, a student, a watcher. He was the one who dumped Ellen Beeson's body because he was scared. He was the one who bragged about knowing the field because he'd been taught. But the killer, the one who folded the arms, the one who carved the spiral, the one who's still out there." Tim took a step forward. "He's standing right in front of you." Silence. Absolute. Deafening. Hedrick didn't move. He didn't blink. His face remained utterly still. But his eyes flickered. Just for a fraction of a second. A spark. A recognition. A terrible, ancient understanding. Then, the courtroom erupted. Reporters shouted. Lawyers scrambled. The judge banged his gavel. Tim Miller didn't move. He just stared at Hedrick. And Hedrick, slowly, deliberately, lifted his right hand and touched his collar, just above the lapel, where a pin had been. Now there was only a small, circular indentation, like something had been removed. A badge, a crest, a falcon. The rain had returned. A cold, relentless drizzle that slicked the streets of League City and turned the memorial field into a muddy graveyard. Frank Vargas stood under the awning of the local diner, sipping bitter coffee, his eyes fixed on the chain-link fence surrounding the Calder Road memorial. He'd been called back to the scene. Again. The oil stain had been washed away. The spiral on the cross had been scrubbed clean. But the news had broken. Tim Miller's accusation. The photo. The falcon. The identity of the real killer. The whole city was buzzing. The FBI was mobilizing. A task force was being formed. The press descended like vultures. Vargas didn't care. He knew. He'd known since the moment he'd heard the voice on the phone. He'd known since the moment he'd read Bell's journal. He'd known since the moment he'd seen the pearl in the fog. The killer wasn't Hedrick. He wasn't even the man in the blue shirt. The killer was the idea, the ritual, the silence. And it was growing. He checked his phone. No signal. He looked up. Through the drizzle he saw a figure standing at the far end of the field, near the oldest derrick. A man, wearing a long, dark coat, and in his hand, a camera. The camera clicked. Once, twice, 3 times. Vargas's blood turned to ice. He didn't move. He didn't breathe. He just watched. The man raised the camera to his eye. And then, he turned. Slowly, and looked directly at Vargas. Through the rain, through the fence, through the decades. Their eyes met. The man smiled, a thin, cold, joyless smile, and then he turned away. He walked calmly into the mist, vanishing. Just like the others, Vargas's phone buzzed, an incoming text from an unknown number. He opened it. One word. Next, below it a single grainy photograph. It was a picture of a young woman, dark hair, faded red highlight, storm cloud eyes, smiling, wearing a single strand of pearls. Heidi Villarreal Phi. The caption underneath the photo. She's still waiting. Vargas's hands shook. He looked back at the field. The mist was parting, just slightly, revealing the silhouette of a fifth cross. New, unmarked, waiting, and beside it, pressed deep into the mud, was the distinct, three-pronged imprint of a boot heel. A work boot, heavy, industrial, and it pointed directly towards the center of the Calder field. Vargas's phone buzzed again. Another text. This one had a video attachment. He opened it. The screen was dark. Then a single beam of light flickered on. It was a flashlight. It swept slowly across the inside of a small, concrete room. Damp walls, rusted pipes, the stench of decay. And then, the light settled on a body, naked, arms folded neatly across the chest, hair long, dark, streaked with a faded red highlight. Heidi Villarreal Phi. Her eyes were open, staring directly into the lens. And beside her, on the floor, lay a single perfect pearl. The camera zoomed in on her face. Her lips moved. No sound came from the phone. But Vargas knew. He knew what she was saying. He'd heard it before. In the fog. In the wind. In the silence between heartbeats. Help me. The video ended. The screen went black. Vargas dropped the phone. It clattered onto the wet pavement. He didn't pick it up. He just stood there, staring at the field, staring at the new cross, staring at the empty space where the killer had stood. And in the distance, the rhythmic thump, thump, thump of the distant pumps echoed louder than ever, like a heartbeat, slow, deliberate, waiting. And then, from somewhere deep within the field, a new sound began. Not the hue, not the click. A low, mournful wail. A woman's voice, singing, softly, off-key, a lullaby. The same lullaby Heidi's mother used to sing to her. The same lullaby that had haunted Vargas's dreams since he was a boy. He closed his eyes. He didn't run. He didn't call for help. He just listened. And the song grew louder, until it filled the entire world. And then it stopped. Silence, thicker than before, colder, more absolute. And then a single clear voice whispered directly into his ear, as if the speaker stood right behind him, breath hot against his neck. "We're not done yet, detective." Vargas opened his eyes. The field was empty. The mist was gone. The stars were out. And on the fresh, unmarked cross, freshly carved into the wood, gleaming in the moonlight, was a new symbol, a spiral, 3 concentric rings, complete, ending not in abruptness, but in a single perfect circle, the circle of eternity, the circle of the grave, and beneath it in fresh, bloody letters, as if written with a fingernail, "The last one is mine." Vargas turned. Behind him, on the wet pavement, lay his phone. The screen was cracked, the glass was shattered, and on the cracked surface, reflected in the shards, was the image of a man, standing just beyond the diner's awning, wearing a long, dark coat, wearing a blue shirt, and holding a camera. The camera's lens was trained on Vargas. The shutter clicked, once, and the reflection in the glass winked. Vargas didn't move. He didn't breathe. He just stared at the reflection, and the man in the reflection smiled and raised a single finger to his temple, like a salute. Then he stepped backward into the shadows and vanished, just like the others. Vargas looked down at the shattered phone. The reflection was gone, Only the cracked glass remained, and on the screen, blinking once, then fading, was a single message. From an unknown number. "I'm coming home." The rain began again. Cold, heavy, falling like tears from a sky that had long since stopped caring. And somewhere deep in the heart of the killing fields, the soil stirred, and something began to rise. Rain had stopped. The air, thick with the scent of wet earth and decaying vegetation, hung motionless over the Calder field. No wind stirred the tall, matted grasses. No insects hummed. Even the distant, ever-present thrum of I-45 seemed muted, as if the highway itself held its breath. The four crosses at the memorial stood stark against the bruised twilight sky, their wooden arms like broken fingers pointing accusingly at the heavens. Frank Vargas didn't move from his position on the shoulder of the newly paved Calder road. He'd been standing there for hours, since the moment he'd received the text message that ended with "I'm coming home." His phone lay face down on the damp asphalt, its cracked screen dark. He hadn't checked it again. He didn't need to. The image was seared into his mind. Heidi Villarreal-Fai's face, staring out from the grainy photo, her storm cloud eyes wide with a terror that transcended death. And beneath it, the single word "neck." He wasn't waiting for the killer. He was waiting for the silence to break. And it did. A low, rhythmic thump, thump, thump began. Not from the refinery pumps. This was closer, heavier, mechanical, yet organic, like a giant rusted heart restarting after decades of stillness. Vargas turned slowly, his gaze sweeping the field. The mist, which had been clinging to the ground like a shroud, began to rise. It coiled upwards from the base of the oldest oil derrick, the one that loomed largest, its skeletal frame black against the fading light. The thumping intensified, vibrating through the soles of his boots, up his legs, into his chest. Dust rained down from the corroded metal. Then, a sound cut through the oppressive quiet. A woman's voice, singing, softly, off-key, a lullaby. It was the same song Lillian Villarreal-Fai had sung to Heidi, the same one Vargas's own mother had sung to him as a child, before the cancer took her, the same one that had haunted his dreams for 36 years. He knew it by heart. "Sleep, my darling, close your eyes, dream of stars in silver skies. The night is long, but dawn will come, and you'll be safe when morning's done." The melody drifted on the stagnant air, seeming to emanate not from any single point, but from the very earth around the derrick. It was mournful, beautiful, and utterly chilling. Vargas didn't run. He couldn't. He felt rooted, as if the mud itself had reached up and seized his ankles. He raised his flashlight, its beam slicing through the rising fog. The light caught the glint of something metallic at the base of the derrick. A camera. A small, old-fashioned 35mm film camera, its lens gleaming wetly. It sat on a tripod, perfectly centered, pointed directly at the memorial crosses. The singing stopped. Silence returned, heavier than before. Then, a soft, mechanical clack echoed across the field. The camera's shutter clicked. Once, twice, 3 times. Each click was a punctuation mark in the horror. Vargas's hand trembled as he reached into his coat pocket. His fingers closed around the cold, smooth surface of the evidence bag he'd carried for decades. Inside, the fragment of dark green canvas, the crushed cigarette butt, the photograph of the spiral scratched into the live oak tree. He pulled them out, holding them up in the dim light, as if they were talismans against the encroaching darkness. A shadow detached itself from the base of the derrick. Tall, impossibly thin, wearing a long, dark coat that seemed to absorb the last of the light. The figure moved with a strange, unhurried grace, stepping out of the mist as if walking through water. It stopped 10 feet from Vargas. The man's face was obscured by the deep hood of the coat, but Vargas could feel the weight of his gaze. He didn't see eyes. He felt them, cold, hollow, ancient. In the figure's gloved hand, He held a small rectangular object. A compact digital camera? No. Too bulky. Too deliberate. It was a film canister. The same type used in the night. The figure raised the canister slowly, deliberately, until it was level with his face. And then, without a word, without a sound, he placed it gently onto the hood of Vargas's parked car. The action was reverent, ritualistic. The figure stepped back. Then he turned and walked towards the memorial crosses. Vargas didn't move. He watched, frozen, as the man approached the newest cross, the one erected for Audrey Cook. He reached out, his gloved hand brushing the weathered wood. He didn't carve anything. He simply touched it, as if acknowledging an old friend. Then he turned and looked directly at Vargas. For the first time, the hood fell back slightly. Vargas saw skin, pale, wrinkled, scarred. But it wasn't the face of an old man. It was the face of a man who had aged differently, who had been preserved, who had waited. The eyes were the worst. They weren't human, not anymore. They were milky white, clouded with cataracts. Yet they held a terrifying, piercing intelligence. They didn't blink. They just stared, fixed, unblinking, like the lenses of the camera. And then the lips moved, a dry, papery whisper, barely audible above the sudden, frantic drumming of Vargas's own heart. "You're late." Vargas's mouth opened, but no sound came out. His mind screamed, "Who are you? What are you?" The figure tilted his head, a gesture both curious and profoundly sad. "I've been waiting," the whisper continued, "for someone who remembers." He lifted his hand, pointing not at Vargas, but past him, towards the direction of League City, towards the lights of the highway. "Your wife," the voice rasped. "She remembered. She always remembered." Vargas's blood turned to ice. He hadn't spoken of his wife's death to anyone connected to this case. Not even to Tim Miller. How he managed. The word cracking like dry bone. The figure didn't answer. He simply turned away again. He walked towards the other crosses. Laura Miller's, Heidi Villarreal-Fai's. He touched each one in turn, his movements slow, almost tender. When he reached Heidi's cross, he paused. He reached into the pocket of his coat and withdrew a small, delicate object. A pearl, Heidi's pearl. He held it up, letting the weak moonlight catch its luminous sheen. "She wore it every day," the voice whispered, echoing Lillian's words. "Her good luck charm." The figure dropped the pearl onto the moss-covered base of the cross. It landed with a soft plink, rolling once before settling into the damp earth. He stepped back, and then he spoke the final words. "Now, it's yours." Before Vargas could react, the figure turned and walked swiftly back towards the derrick. He didn't vanish into the mist. He simply dissolved. One moment he was there, the next, the space where he stood was empty. Only the faintest shimmer in the air remained, like heat haze over asphalt. The camera on the tripod clicked again. Once. The film canister on Vargas's car lid remained. The singing began again. Not from the derrick, from behind him. Vargas whirled around. Standing at the edge of the pavement where the road met the field was a woman. She was young, maybe 25. Dark hair, long and straight, streaked with a faded red highlight near the temples. She wore a simple black dress, identical to the one Heidi had worn the night she vanished. Her bare feet were pale in the moonlight, planted firmly on the asphalt. She smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was a knowing smile. A weary, sorrowful smile. And she was holding a small, battered cassette player. She pressed play. The tinny, distorted sound of a child's laughter filled the air. Then a woman's voice, singing the lullaby, clear and sweet, filtered through the cheap speaker. "Sleep, my darling, close your eyes." The woman on the pavement raised her head. Her eyes were the color of storm clouds. Heidi Villarreal-Fai. But she wasn't looking at Vargas. She was looking past him, towards the derrick. Vargas's breath hitched. He looked back. The derrick was gone. In its place stood a large, ancient live oak tree, its gnarled branches stretching towards the sky, leaves rustling softly in a breeze that didn't exist. Beneath the tree, kneeling in the grass, was a boy, no older than 12. Dressed in overalls and a faded blue shirt, he was digging a hole with a small rusted trowel. He worked with intense concentration, his small hands moving quickly, methodically. Beside him, on the ground, lay a single perfect pearl. The boy looked up. His eyes were wide, innocent, and utterly, terrifyingly empty. He smiled and waved at Vargas. Vargas stumbled backward, tripping over his own feet, falling hard onto the wet asphalt. He scrambled to his knees, gasping, his vision swimming. He looked back. The tree was gone. The derrick stood tall again. The boy was gone. The woman on the pavement was gone. Only the cassette player remained, lying on the asphalt, the tape still spinning, the lullaby playing on loop. Sleep, my darling. Close your eyes. Vargas's trembling hand reached out, not for the cassette, but for the film canister on his car. He picked it up. It was warm. Warmer than it should have been. He fumbled with the cap. It opened easily. Inside, nestled in the foam lining, were 3 spools of 16mm film. He pulled one out. It was labeled in neat, precise handwriting. Heidi Marie Villarreal Fee, October. He slid the spool into the palm of his hand. The film was brittle, yellowed with age. He didn't need a projector to know what was on it. He could feel it, the weight of it, the horror of it. He slipped the spool into his pocket, next to the fragments of canvas and the cigarette butt. He picked up the cassette player. The music was fading now, the battery dying. He turned it off. The silence rushed back in, thicker, colder, more suffocating than before. He got to his feet, his body shaking violently. He walked to his car, his movements robotic. He opened the driver's door. On the passenger seat, neatly folded, lay a single piece of paper. He picked it up. The handwriting was familiar, crisp, precise, like Bell's journal. Detective Vargas, you found the notebook. You understood the spiral. Now you understand the truth. The killer isn't one man. He is a lineage. Edward Harold Bell taught the ritual. He showed the field. He gave the pearl. Clyde Hedrick learned. He became the guardian. He kept the memory alive. He buried the bodies. He carved the symbols. He waited for the next one. The boy under the tree, he was the son of Clyde's daughter. He inherited the curse. He was born here, in this field, on the anniversary of Heidi's death. He doesn't kill because he wants to. He kills because he must. To complete the circle, to honor the sacrifice, to keep the silence. The pearl was never lost. It was passed down, like the ring, like the knife, like the memory. The last witness is you. You saw the girl. You heard the song. You held the film. You are the only one who knows, so you must carry it. Until the next one comes. The field remembers, always. The keeper. Vargas stared at the note. His hands shook so badly he nearly dropped it. The words blurred. He looked down at the film canister in his other hand. The pearl was never lost. It was passed down. He thought of Mrs. Eleanor Griggs, the dog, the skull, the pearl she'd found beside Heidi's remains. He thought of Lillian Villarreal Fay, clutching the locket with Heidi's picture. He thought of the way the pearl had been found, after the body. How had it gotten there? Unless someone had placed it there. Someone who knew, someone who had watched, someone who had waited. And now, he looked up. The memorial crosses stood silent. But the new cross, the one for Audrey Cook, it was different. The wood was darker, wet, and carved into its side, fresh and glistening with sap, was a new symbol. Not the incomplete spiral, a full circle, complete, perfect. And beneath it, written in the same precise script as the note, witness. Vargas's blood ran cold. He turned his head slowly, scanning the surrounding neighborhood. The houses along Calder Road were dark. Windows were shuttered. Lights were out, except one, a small, single-story bungalow on the far corner of the field, just beyond the church property line. Its porch light was on, a warm, golden glow, and on the front step, silhouetted against the light, stood a figure, small, thin, wearing a blue shirt, and holding a camera. The shutter clicked. Once. Vargas didn't think. He didn't run. He didn't scream. He walked, slowly, deliberately, towards the house. The path was overgrown with weeds. The air grew colder with every step. The scent of oil and decay was overwhelming now, mixed with the faint, sweet rot of flowers left at the memorial. He reached the fence. The gate was unlocked. He pushed it open. The hinges groaned, a sound that echoed unnaturally loud in the dead air. He climbed the 3 steps to the porch. The front door was slightly ajar. A sliver of warm light spilled out onto the damp boards. He pushed it open. The room inside was small, sparsely furnished. A single armchair, a table, a television with rabbit ears. The walls were covered in photographs, hundreds of them, all of girls, young women, dark hair, faded red highlights, storm cloud eyes, Heidi Villarreal Farr, Laura Miller, Audrey Cook, Donna Prudhomme, Colette Wilson, Rhonda Johnson, Sharon Shaw, Gloria Gonzalez, Kimberly Pitchford, Michelle Garvey, Susan Eads, every single victim, all arranged in chronological order. On the table sat a small, dusty typewriter. Beside it, a stack of yellowed newspaper clippings, and a single framed photograph. It showed a young man, maybe 22, clean-cut, kind eyes, standing proudly beside a white van. The van had a dent on the driver's side. The man was smiling. He was wearing a blue shirt, with a falcon emblem on the breast pocket, Clyde Hedrick. But the date scrolled on the bottom in pencil read, September, the day Laura Miller vanished. Vargas's gaze snapped to the wall. There, pinned between photos of Heidi and Laura, was a smaller, newer photograph. It showed a boy, about 12 years old, dressed in overalls, standing beside the derrick, holding a small rusted trowel, smiling. And beside him, in the dirt, lay a single perfect pearl. The caption underneath was typed in neat letters, "My son, born October 10th. Vargas's breath came in ragged gasps. He looked around the room. On the floor, beside the chair, lay a pair of small, muddy work boots, sized a child's size, and on the windowsill, resting on a dusty vase, was another film canister. It was labeled, Laura Lynn Miller, September 10th. Vargas walked forward, drawn by a terrible magnetic pull. He picked up the canister. It was warm. He turned. The door slammed shut behind him. The lock clicked. He spun around. The key was gone. He ran to the window. It was nailed shut. He pounded on the glass. "Hello," he shouted, his voice raw. "Let me out." Silence. Then, from the other side of the wall, a child's voice, clear and calm, sang softly. "Sleep, my darling. Close your eyes." Vargas turned back to the table. He picked up the typewriter. It was still warm. He pressed the carriage return lever. The bell rang. He looked down. On the sheet of paper, freshly typed, were the words, "The last one is mine." Vargas froze. He looked up. In the reflection of the darkened television screen, he saw himself, and behind him, standing in the doorway of the small bedroom, was the boy, wearing the blue shirt, holding the camera, and in his hand, a single perfect pearl. The boy smiled and raised the camera. The shutter clicked. Once, the flash illuminated the room. For a single blinding instant, Vargas saw the boy's face, not innocent, not empty, full of tears, full of terror, full of understanding. And then, the flash died. The room plunged back into darkness. Vargas stood alone. The typewriter clattered. Another sheet of paper rolled out. He stepped forward. He didn't want to look, but he had to. He picked up the paper. The words were there, crisp and undeniable. Witness N3, Frank Vargas. Date of death, tonight. Cause of death, heart of failure. Location, Calder Field Memorial. Note, the fields are still. The silence is complete. Vargas dropped the paper. He looked around the room. The photographs, the typewriter, the film canisters, the boy. He saw it now. The pattern, the cycle. Bell created the ritual. Hedrick preserved it. And now, the boy was the final guardian. The keeper. The one who made sure the victims were remembered. The one who made sure the killers were forgotten. The one who made sure the silence endured. Because the only way to stop the killings was to become part of them. To be the witness. To be the story. To be the ghost. Vargas's chest tightened. A crushing pressure. He tried to breathe. He couldn't. He looked at the clock on the wall. 11:59 p.m. The second hand ticked. 1, 2, 3. He staggered backward, hitting the wall. The room spun. The pictures on the walls, they were moving. Heidi's eyes blinked. Laura's lips moved, forming the word help. Audrey's head turned. Donna's hand reached out. They weren't photographs anymore. They were windows. And behind each one was a face, staring out, waiting. Vargas's knees buckled. He collapsed onto the floor. The last thing he saw was the boy, standing in the doorway. The camera raised. The shutter clicked. And then, darkness. The sun rose over League City, painting the sky in hues of peach and lavender. Birds chirped. Cars drove past on the newly paved Calder Road. Children laughed on their way to school. Life went on. Near the church, a maintenance worker arrived early to clean the memorial crosses. He whistled a tune as he wiped dust from the wooden markers. He paused at the newest cross, the one for Audrey Cook. He frowned. The wood looked damp. He leaned closer. It wasn't dew, it was oil. Dark, viscous, and etched into the base of the cross, barely visible beneath the grime, was a symbol, a perfect, complete circle. The worker blinked. He rubbed his eyes. He looked around. Nothing, just the crosses, the mist, the quiet. He shrugged. Probably just a leak from the old irrigation pipe. He finished his cleaning, humming softly. He walked back to his truck. As he drove away, a small white object caught his eye on the ground beside the cross. He stopped. He got out. He picked it up. It was a pearl, small, perfect, cold. He turned it over in his palm. He'd seen one like it before. On TV, in the news. He looked back at the cross. He looked at the pearl. He didn't put it in his pocket. He didn't call the police. He just stood there, staring. And then, slowly, deliberately, he knelt down and placed the pearl gently on the moss beside the cross. He stood. He walked back to his truck. He didn't look back. The Texas Equals Headwash headquarters was quiet. Tim Miller sat at his desk, staring at the photograph of his daughter, Laura. He'd just finished reviewing a new tip, a blurry cell phone video from someone claiming to have seen a man in a blue shirt near the killing fields last night. He sighed, rubbing his tired eyes. He'd spent 38 years chasing ghosts. He'd won a lawsuit. He'd named a law after his daughter. He'd built a foundation. He'd found answers for some, but not for all. He picked up his coffee mug. His hand trembled slightly. He looked down. A single, perfect pearl rested at the bottom of the mug. He didn't remember putting it there. He didn't remember drinking from it. He stared at it. The pearl. He'd seen it before, in the coroner's report, on Heidi's body. In the fog, he picked it up. It was cold, too cold. He held it to the light, and in the center of the pearl, reflecting the morning sun, he saw a tiny, intricate image. A spiral, 3 rings, incomplete, ending abruptly, just like the one on the live oak tree, just like the one on the memorial cross, just like the one in Bell's journal. Tim Miller's breath caught. He looked up. On his desk, beside the photograph of Laura, was a new item. A small, sealed plastic bag. Inside, a single, dried fragment of dark green canvas. He picked it up. It was warm. He looked at the label on the bag, handwritten in faded ink. Evidence. Frank Vargas. Case. Tim Miller's blood turned to ice. He looked at the photograph of his daughter. Her eyes. They seemed darker, fuller, more aware. He looked down at the pearl in his hand. He thought of the last words Vargas had said to him, years ago during a private meeting in this very office. Tim, I think the real killer isn't the man who killed them. It's the silence, and the silence has a name. Tim Miller closed his eyes. He heard the faintest echo of a low, guttural hum. He opened them. On his computer screen, a notification popped up, an anonymous email. Subject, witness. He clicked it. The message was blank. Attached was a single file, a video. He hesitated. He clicked play. The screen flickered. Grainy black and white footage. A field. Night. Fog. A man in a dark coat stands beside a derrick. He holds a camera. He turns. It's Frank Vargas. His face is gaunt, hollow eye. He whispers something. The camera zooms in. His lips move. The audio is scratchy, but Tim Miller hears it, clear as a bell. It's not over. The screen cuts to static. Then, a single handwritten note appears on the black screen. The last one is mine. The video ends. Tim Miller sits perfectly still. The hue fades. The room is silent. He looks down at the pearl in his hand. He looks at the photograph of Laura. Her eyes are closed now. And on the desk beside the bag of canvas lies a new piece of paper, typed, neat. Tim, you found the pearl. You saw the film. You are the last witness who remembers. Carry it. Until the next one comes. The field remembers. Always. Tim Miller closes his eyes. He feels the cold weight of the pearl. He hears the whisper of the wind, and somewhere far away, on the edge of the world, a camera clicks. Once, the screen goes dark. The end credits roll. But the final image on the screen isn't black. It's a single, perfect pearl. And inside it, reflected in its flawless surface, is the silhouette of a boy standing beside a derrick, smiling, holding a camera. And beside him, in the dirt, another pearl, waiting. The Calder Field Memorial had been renamed, the Healing Fields. A small park had been built, benches, wildflowers, a fountain that played a gentle, looping melody. Children played on the swings. Elderly couples walked hand in hand. A local artist had sculpted 4 bronze figures, each representing a woman. Heidi, Laura, Audrey. They stood serene. Arms folded, heads bowed. The town had moved on. Tim Miller visited every Sunday. He brought flowers. He didn't speak. He just sat. He never told anyone about the pearl, or the canvas, or the film, or the email. He kept them locked in a safe deposit box. He had 2 keys, one for his granddaughter, Elise. She was 6. She loved to draw. She drew pictures of angels, with wings and pearls. One afternoon, while Tim was watering the flowers, Elise ran up to him. "Grandpa," she said, her voice bright, "did you know the lady in the statue has a secret?" Tim smiled, a sad, tired thing. "Oh, what secret, sweetheart?" Elise leaned in, her eyes wide with conspiratorial wonder. "She hides her pearl," she whispered, in the hollow of her heart. Tim's breath stopped. He looked at the bronze statue of Heidi Villarreal Fay. Her hands were folded over her chest. Her dress flowed down in elegant lines, and right where her heart would be was a tiny, perfect indentation, like a depression, like a place meant for something. Something small, something round, something cold. Tim looked down at his own hand in his pocket. He felt the smooth, cool surface of the pearl. He'd carried it with him every day since the day he found it. He hadn't known why. He just knew he had to. He looked back at Elise. She was smiling. She reached out and gently, carefully, placed a small, glittering object into the hollow of Heidi's bronze chest. It was a pearl, identical, perfect, cold, and as the sun set, casting long shadows across the healing fields, Tim Miller didn't move. He just watched, and in the distance the faint, rhythmic thump, thump, thump of distant pumps echoed, like a heartbeat, slow, deliberate, waiting, and high above, on the rooftop of the abandoned refinery building, overlooking the field, a single unmarked window glinted in the fading light. Behind it, a small, old-fashioned 35mm film camera sat on a tripod. Its lens was trained on the bronze statue. The shutter clicked. Once, and then, quietly, the camera began to rewind. The film inside, exposed and developing in the dark, showed the final frame, a perfect, complete circle. And beneath it, in neat, precise letters, "Witness." The camera stopped. The room fell silent, and outside, the children's laughter rose, pure and bright, into the Texas evening. The field remembered, always.